Hey everyone, I'm coming at you today not from the greenhouse but from my husband's man cave, and that's for a couple reasons. Number one, it's really hot in the greenhouse and the fans are running non-stop, so it was going to be kind of loud. And number two, I had so much stuff on my table that I thought I'd lay some things on my husband's table in here just to show you, because I want to do a video on what you guys asked for when I did that poll, and most of you guys wanted me to do a video on the basic types of succulents and their care. And so I'm going to go over quite a few, although there's a few that I'll kind of lump together. And before I do any of that, I do want to tell you that at the end of the video I'm going to do a giveaway, because I mentioned it in my last video and I've also reached over 1,000 subscribers, so thank you guys so much for watching. Anyway, what I want to talk about real quick is light and soil. Now, I don't want to talk about it long so we can get into each different type, but in general, succulents like a lot of light. Now, there are some that need more than others, and particularly things like Echeveria, things that can stretch out. And I will show you an example right now. So, you know, an Echeveria should look compact like this, and you shouldn't really see a stem. Now, if you have a plant, or it doesn't have to be an Echeveria, this can happen with certain types of Sedivaria, anything like that. If you start seeing the stem like this one hasn't gotten quite as much light. It should be compact, just like the other one. It's a Pearl von Nuremberg, in case you guys are wondering, but it should be nice and compact, but unfortunately, I left it in here in the shade, and so it's stretching. But not to worry, you can put it in the sun and it will quit stretching, or you can actually cut off the top and root that. But in general, succulents like a lot of sunlight, and I will tell you the few that don't like as much, but you want to watch out for stretching. If you see stretching, it needs more. The other thing you want to watch out for is sunburn, and I'm going to put a picture of a couple, or at least one of my plants with sunburn, and that usually happens if you don't acclimate your plants to the sun and they get way too much all day. And it typically burns in the middle of the afternoon, where the really hot heat is just terrible on your plants. So that's typically when I see sunburn happen, and I'll show you a picture of what it looks like. So unfortunately, you can't get rid of the sunburn, but a lot of times if you leave those plants out there, they will continue to grow, and the sunburnt leaves will grow down to the bottom and it'll be tougher. And that's usually what I do in the case of my outdoor garden, if you guys watched that video. But I'll show you what sunburn looks like, and I wouldn't have gotten that if I would have put my plant out there maybe a few hours and just increased it by a few hours each day. I just didn't do that because I'm lazy. So just as far as light, if it's stretching, it needs more. If it's burnt, you should have acclimated it. Now, as far as soil, and I know this is really general and I'm going fast because I really do want to get to the different types, but as far as soil, any kind of succulent you have needs well-draining soil. And by well-draining, that means when you pour your water into the pot, you should see it flow right out the bottom. The other thing is, it needs to dry out really fast. So even if it drains right out of the bottom, but you notice several days later, even with it in the sun, it's still wet, then that's not good enough. So there's lots of different things you can mix together to make a really well-draining soil. And for a long time, the only thing I used was Miracle-Gro cactus and succulent soil mixed with perlite. And every now and then I put in pea gravel. But now what I like to do is use chicken grit, which is crushed granite. And I have a little bit of each in these little pots. So this is the Miracle-Gro cactus and succulent soil, and it's not really bad. And if you have some plants that do like a little bit more water, this may be just fine, and we'll talk about which ones do. The only thing I don't like is lately I've been seeing that there's like little pieces of bark in there, and I don't know, it just depends on what bag you get, I guess. But you can just use this, you just have to be really careful about your watering. There's a little bit of perlite in there, but not a lot. So this is perlite. You guys probably have seen this stuff. It looks like styrofoam, feels like styrofoam. A lot of people choose to mix these 50-50 and use that as their base, and that's totally fine because that's going to make a pretty well draining mix. The main thing that people don't like, and that I don't like about it, even though I still do it, is every time you pour water in your pot, that perlite's so light it floats to the top and it just gets annoying. But if you don't mind that and you don't fill your pots way too high so it doesn't spill out, then you're good. Now, here's what I've really been getting into lately, and it's chicken grit. So it looks like it's almost kind of purpley, but basically it's crushed granite, and it's pretty cheap. I bought it at the Tractor Supply store, and what I'm doing now is mixing. I have this big bin that I mix my soil in, so I'm mixing in the cactus and succulent soil. I do throw in a little bit of perlite, but then I'm using a lot of this, like almost 50%. And it's cheap, it's a little bit heavier, so if you're gonna do a giant pot, I might not use this, but I really like it because things drain through it so fast. So those are just some options. Now, there's other things that people use, like pumice, turfus, stuff like that, but unfortunately, that's kind of hard to get in my area, and if I order it, it's gonna be really expensive, so I wanna use what's cheap for me. So anyway, I'm gonna cut real quick, and I wanna show you exactly what your pot should look like when you water it. And then we'll go from there and start talking about the different types of succulents, the basic types, and kind of their specific needs. So give me just 1 second. Okay guys, I am in the greenhouse right now, so ignore the fan, but I've got my basic 4-inch terracotta pot right here. This is my mixing bin, so I've already mixed 50-50 perlite and cactus soil, and then I've got a handful of the chicken grit right here. And what I'm basically gonna do is just kind of mix all that together and then put it in there. And honestly, I think I probably want a little more chicken grit, but I can always add more perlite. And I'm gonna show you how, okay, there's some more chicken grit. Then we're gonna look at what it looks like when we put it at the sink and give it some water. So anyway, that's good enough. Now, I probably would have put more chicken grit in there and less perlite, but I just want to show you how it drains. So let's go to the sink. Okay guys, we are at the sink, and you guys, I hope you will ignore my mess, but really I don't have anyone in here except me, so I'm going to run this water through the pot, and maybe I'll do it a little bit less so it doesn't splash everywhere. But let's go ahead and water our pot and see what happens. And you can see some perlite floating up to the top. Uh-oh, spilled some. But do you see how fast the water just drained out and it's draining out the bottom? So it's just dripping right out the bottom. This is what I don't like about perlite. You see how it kind of gets around on the sides? But I can add some more water. And you're gonna see the perlite kind of floating to the top, but water is coming right out the bottom. So the better your pot does that, the better drainage you have. So just kind of watch out for that, and if you don't see the water coming right out the bottom, then you need to add something else to your pot. It may have to be perlite, it could be the chicken grit, pea gravel, pumice, any of that stuff. And then also keep an eye on it later on. You know, you'll have it in the sun, but look at it and make sure later on it's dry. So for example, I've got this guy right here, and very dry. I just watered him, I think, yesterday. But anyway, it's got some gravel, perlite. There's no chicken grit in here, but he's pretty happy. So we're gonna go back into the man cave now and look at the different types. All right, so I'm back in the gazebo, and now we're going to talk about just several basic types of succulents that you'll see when you go to the store to buy them or just around nurseries. So the first type, of course, is my favorite, Echeverias. Echeverias are my favorite because they have rosettes. They come in all types, all colors. You've seen lots of them in my garden and throughout my station. This is my favorite type altogether. I love them. Basic requirements for Echeverias. And here's one more. I forgot I brought this one out there. That's a Purpusorum. Kind of neat. Anyway, basic requirements for these guys. So, number one, we talked about light. They need a lot of light or they're going to stretch out like that Pearl von Nürnberg that I just showed you. But they can get sunburnt. So, make sure if you are going to give them tons of light, you watch out for them, especially in the afternoon, or acclimate them just a few hours more each day. That way they don't get burnt real bad. So lots of light, And water is going to be not very often. So I have a whole video where I talk about how to know when your succulents need to be watered. But in general, what I do is I look at the bottom leaves, and if they're wrinkly, I know it needs water. The soil has to be completely dry though. If they're wrinkly somewhere, or they don't look very fat at all, they look real thin at the bottom, I know it needs water. And then another thing, I haven't watered this one since I got it. They'll feel kind of floppy. Now this one doesn't feel really floppy. You see how kind of more of the plant is moving, but sometimes you'll feel the bottom leaves and they just feel really floppy. And I may be able to find, well actually this, I haven't watered this Pearl von Nürnberg. Kind of floppy. This one could probably use some water, but in general, Echeverias can go a long time without water. And so if you're not sure, don't water them. But they will tell you when they need it, because you'll see the bottom leaves start wrinkling or looking really thin, or you'll just feel the plant and it just doesn't feel firm anymore. And if you'll notice at the bottom of all of these, you'll find dead leaves. That's normal. So don't freak out that your plant is dying when you find these dead leaves at the bottom. That's normal for all sorts of succulents. See all these dead leaves? A lot of people think there's something wrong, but they have to shed these bottom leaves so it makes room for new growth. So in general, when we talk about Echeverias, lots of light, acclimate them so they can get all day, but without getting sunburned, and only water when they tell you to. If they don't get enough light, they're gonna stretch out. If they get too much light too fast, they'll get sunburned. So yeah, let's move on. Now, Echeverias we're done with, and then the next category, I'm kind of putting Haworthias and Aloes in the same category, and they're not the same types of plants, but this is a coral aloe that I have, and then I've got this Haworthia. They call it a fairy washboard, but I can't remember, Limifolia maybe, and then I've got this regular, what they call zebra plant, and it's made tons of babies over time. But basically these guys don't need as much light. They're not gonna stretch out for you like some of the other ones will. And if you give them too much light, the ends of them are gonna burn. So I don't know if you can see right here. This was a plant that I actually did keep out in the sun too much and eventually did bring it back in, but the little tips are burnt. So it doesn't like a ton of light. It likes morning light, if anything. And these are really well suited for indoors, say in your window, something like that, where they get morning light but don't need tons and tons of sun. So in general, Haworthias and Aloes. Now, you're probably thinking, well, aloe vera likes a lot of sun, and they do, but at the same time they can get sunburnt. I don't know if you can tell, but this one actually, I took it completely out of the sun, and so it started, these leaves started laying down, and that's what they do when they're trying to absorb more sun. So I had it completely under the sink that we were at earlier. I was moving a bunch of stuff and I didn't want to get it sunburnt. So I am gonna move it somewhere with a little more light, just not where it gets afternoon sun, because it will get very unhappy. And once I do that, these guys will come back up and look a lot prettier. But I wanted to show you because there's so many different types of aloes and Haworthias. These are just 3 that I picked up real fast. So in general, they don't like as much light. Morning light, if anything. The afternoon sun can sunburn them, and I've had aloe vera that has turned bright red and gotten sunburnt, so they don't like that. And as far as watering, I wait until the soil is completely dried out, and then I will water. And I also will kind of feel the bottom leaves. So when I have this plant, I know kind of how fat the leaves are supposed to be. Sometimes you can feel the bottom leaves and they just don't feel as fat. So if the soil's been dry for a really long time and you haven't watered it and they're starting to look a little thin, then yeah, you can give it water. Now the Haworthias, they won't really do that. And so what I generally do is wait for quite a while. If they've been really dry for a long time and the tips aren't getting dry, even outside of being out of the sun, and you see some sort of evidence of them getting dry, or their leaves, really what I see is their leaves start getting really thin and they're just not as fat. So if that's the case, you can water them. You don't have to wait for that to happen. They have a general rule with succulents. They say once the soil is completely dry, you can water it really, really well, and you can, but I like that rule, except I say when it's really, really dry, wait at least several more days before you're watering them, just in case. So that's what I have to say about aloes and Haworthias. And there is a big spider in here. Oh my gosh. Okay. Anyway, I was going to show you this video that I did the other day, but I haven't uploaded it yet. But there was a black widow in my garden, and I had my hand reached in there, and I almost grabbed it. But let's move on. So I want to talk about cacti, and this is a really big subject, and this is very, very generalized, but I've got a few different types of cacti here. This is an astrophytum. It's a little, I know what it is, but I'll put the name up there later. And then here's a little Opuntia. So basically cacti, I put them in a really well draining mix. They can do almost all chicken grit or all pumice and just a little bit of the organic stuff, you know, like the Miracle Grow cactus soil, things like that. So they don't need much at all. And sometimes they will tell you when they need something, like they may look a little thin or wrinkled, like this prickly pear. I don't know if you can see right here, there's a little wrinkle in there, and that wasn't there before. And this is a baby, so I know I could water it, but it's very similar to the Haworthia. If you let them dry out really, really well, and then wait several more days, just in case, they should be good to water. And this is very general, but that's typically what I do with all my cacti. And as far as sun, and that, you know, that would include prickly pears, that would include, you know, all those special ones you see over at Home Depot, you know, the grafted ones with the pretty bright orange or pink on the top. And I don't really care for those, but same thing, you know, most people kill those by overwatering, so just don't water them a bunch. They typically won't stretch out. Now, prickly pear will. Their pads that they grow out, if they're rounded, they're great. If they don't get enough sun, they'll stretch out. But the thing with cacti, they need a lot of sun. They want lots and lots and lots of sun because they come from desert-like environments. So I've only maybe seen a few get some sun damage, but you can acclimate them if you're worried. I keep them in the sunniest spot all day long, and in my garden I have one spot that gets sun from morning all the way until the end of the day, and the cacti love it there. They haven't had any problems over the years, so I just go for it, and if they get a little damage, I'm not worried about it, but if you guys are, then you can always acclimate them. So that is what I have to say about cacti in general. And obviously, with all these groups, there's a lot more to it than this, but I just kind of want to go over the basics. And then let's talk about Euphorbia. Now, Euphorbia, there are so many different types. I can't remember the name of this thing, but I'll put it up on the screen. And then this is a Euphorbia snowflake. Kind of looks like a cacti, but very similar. They need a well-draining soil, just like anything else. They don't need a whole bunch of organic matter, and they love the heat, so the more the better. And one thing that is included in Euphorbia are the fire sticks that everyone always talks about, and I've got a hanging basket right over there with a bunch of fire sticks, so I'll take a picture and put that in here. But they love lots of sun. Lots of sun gives some of them their stress colors, but they need a well-draining mix, and they don't need water all the time. So I can tell when my fire sticks need more water because they start getting a little wrinkly or a little thin. But the ones that are out here, they don't ever need more water because they get the rain. Otherwise, I just water them after the soil is really, really dry, and I've waited several more days, and then I give them some water. So Euphorbia, just one thing to remember with these guys, whenever you cut them, there's that sap that comes out. It's white. It can burn your skin. It's also not good if your pets or kids eat it or touch it. So keep it away from pets and small children. And then I think everything else I want to talk about is going to have to be somewhere else. So I want to talk about aeoniums because they're a little bit different. I want to talk about senecios, which is like strings of pearls, strings of bananas, strings of fish hooks, all that stuff. I want to talk about sedums. And then there's kind of a group of plants that has tons of stuff in it that I don't really want to talk about a bunch, but I'll generalize it, and that would be Kalanchoe, Crostula, the lithops, split rocks, and I'll just kind of give you a basic thing about that. And then finally the sempervivums and the sansevieras. And sempervivums are the hens and chicks, in case you guys are wondering. And then the sansevieras are what you commonly see as the snake plant or the mother-in-law's tongue. But we'll talk about those and then we will go from there. But we've got to go to another location to talk about the other stuff. So we'll be back soon. So let's talk about aeoniums. Now, there's a lot of different types, but they all are pretty similar in their needs, and sometimes they are wide open and sometimes you'll see them starting to close like this, and they do that when they're hot because they don't like the heat. They are summer dormant, and I'm sorry, but there's all this grass in between these guys because my husband mows the lawn and doesn't think about my plants. But these are aeoniums. There's an aeonium lily pad right there. That's I think a pinwheel. That's a starburst. I've got some sunburst right here. And by the way, here's a perfect example of sunburn. So that's not a disease, that's just sunburn. They're kind of sensitive, so I may need to move them somewhere else. Then we've got another black one here, and then here's some pretty kiwis. So they call those aeonium tricolors. But anyway, the basic thing with aeoniums is, like I said, they are summer dormant. So they don't need tons of water in the summer, and you're going to be tempted to water them. Right now, they actually probably could use a couple sips because they're so floppy. It's normal for them to lose their bottom leaves in the summer like this, and sometimes they drop a ton. And living here in Little Rock, Arkansas, it gets very, very hot. Today, I think it's 90, what does my watch say? Well, actually, it's only about 90 degrees right now, but it gets a lot hotter than that. So they don't pretty much enjoy the summers, but they can make it. They just only get water when it rains, and if we end up getting rain for too many days, I might move them, but really they're not as picky as, say, Echeverias. They're actually one of the types of succulents that enjoy a little bit more water, and I don't give them as much of the rocky stuff. These are actually just shells that I put in there, and then you'll see a bunch of leaves, so I clearly have to do some maintenance. But with the soil, I don't use nearly as much perlite. So look, it hasn't rained in quite a while, and that soil is still wet, and they don't care. So they're pretty happy. I've never lost an aeonium due to overwatering, if that tells you anything. But it's good to not let them stay wet for a really prolonged period of time. There's an emerald ice, and then got a few over here real quick. There's a pinwheel. I think there's another black one right there, and Mardi Gras, which is actually looking really sad. I need to take that out of the, well, it's kind of shady over here, but it's probably still a little too much sun for that one. And then this is called, I want to say Irish Bouquet. There's some more kiwis, and then I can't even remember what this is, but there's so many leaves in there. So anyway, with aeoniums during the summer, if you get pretty hot summers like we do, I try to keep them in a shady spot and let them just kind of blister their way through the summer. They hate it, but if they can make it through, they enjoy the cooler weather. They're not going to make it through our winters here. They can't tolerate, you know, below freezing temperatures, but they sure do like it when it's cool in the fall and in the early spring, and that's when they put on the most growth. So in general, like I said, they can tolerate a lot more water. They don't really like the heat, so keep them out of the heat. They do like a lot of sun, but they don't like the afternoon sun, which is burning hot. And just remember that you don't have to water them all the time in the summer because they are summer dormant. So let's go ahead and we'll talk about some other stuff now. I think we'll talk about strings next. So now let's talk about strings. So strings are typically senecio. They're trailing, and I just thought I would hang this right here. This is the what you call the string of dolphins. So if you look real close, they look like little dolphins, and it's kind of harder to tell. Well, actually you can tell pretty good at the end too, but they're a little stretched out. They haven't got quite as much sun as they wanted, but that's okay. So main thing with strings, I've noticed that they like a little more water than normal, and I'm assuming that's because water needs to get all the way down to the ends. And I've heard people say that they like full all day sun, but I've found that mine do best when they get just a little bit of sun, like morning sun. And I'll show you right up here. I have a little hanging basket, so there's a string of pearls, and I usually can't get them to grow nearly that long, but since I put them up there, they've done great. And then these dolphins seem to be really happy in the partial shade as well. And then there's, of course, strings of fish hooks, strings of bananas, all those things. I'm sure I'm forgetting some, but in general, they like a little more water. Still, the ones out here, I don't water them. I just let them get rainwater. So if you have them in a hanging basket somewhere where they won't get the really hot afternoon sun, they seem to do best. So that's pretty much my tactic for these guys. And I know this is dirty. I actually had this sitting on the ground. It's hanging on the bottom of this basket, but I just wanted to show them both to you. So anyway, uh-oh, piece fell off. Well, I thought so. Anyway, so strings, typically I like to give them morning sun and avoid the hot afternoon heat. You can see some areas where they'll dry out, and I think because they don't get quite as much sun, they're a little bit further apart down here, but I'm willing to tolerate that to not kill them, because I've never been great with strings until I started keeping them in shadier areas. So strings of pearls, strings of fish hooks, bananas, all those things, strings of tears. I like to keep them in partial shade, water them if it's very dry and they don't get rainwater, or just let them get rainwater whenever it rains. So I think now we're going to go talk about some sedums. So I'm out here at my outdoor succulent garden, and I wanted to show you some sedums. So as you know, if you watch my other videos, I'm not done with this garden yet, but I had a little patch last year of this stuff called sedum lime zinger, and now it's completely taken over. I'm going to take a bunch out, but one of the things I did was pulled off little pieces and put them in certain places, like right there, just kind of as filler. And let's see, I put some right there. So just kind of all over the place. So sedums, they really like cold weather. A lot of them are really cold hardy. Like this one stayed out all year, did not get taken in. It dealt with the snow, it dealt with everything. So a lot of sedums are hardy. That's what they say when they can stand our winters or freezing temperatures. So this one definitely is, and they can really take over, and they're kind of like aeoniums. They're okay with sun, but they seem to grow a lot faster when it's a little bit cooler. So got these sedums here. I also have this. It's called sedum tricolor. I think that's pretty cool. And then I haven't planted these guys yet. I'm really upset because I had a piece that was crested, but I left it out here too long without a pot because I planned on planting it and I didn't, and now the crest is ruined. But you know, sometimes you lose plants, and that's just how it is. So cool thing about sedums is they're pretty good about just breaking a piece off and sticking it somewhere and then making some roots. So I may just stick that there and see how that does. So I'm still going to plant these at some point, but it's just kind of been a mess lately. What I really like to do is put some of this under my azalea bushes and my other little area, landscaping area out front. It doesn't have succulents in there, but they really like it under there in the shade, and they seem to be really happy and spread. And I do the same thing with my hens and chicks, or as you know, sempervivums, what they're called. Now this is a sedum also, and I think I want to call it sedum angeline. I think that's some more lime zinger over there. But there's all sorts of types. I may be able to find some other ones, but I want to show you those. Just make sure you look them up and make sure they're cold hardy before you leave them out all winter. And then since we are out here, I did want to show you, here's what cactus pads look like if they don't get enough sun. And part of this is because I left this guy in the greenhouse too long and it didn't get quite as much sun as out here. So they're getting a little bit longer and not as round. And then sunburn. This is a pretty horrible case of sunburn. but this guy got sunburnt pretty bad, but now the new growth is pretty happy. So there's some sunburn there. This big Echeveria right here clearly has sunburn on the leaf, but the new growth tends to be more tolerant to the sun when that happens. So I will talk more about this when I do my final succulent garden building video, and that's where I saw the Black Widow last time, which is why I put a rock there. And let's see if we can go find some more sedums. Here's a cool sedum that I was walking past as I was going into the backyard, and it's called Dasphilium, and a friend gave it to me, but I don't think this is cold hardy, and I'll have to look it up, but I'll tell you more about it later. Or at least I will put a I'll put what it is on the screen. And then here's a piece of Euphorbia that fell on the ground that someone at the big box store told me I could have. So I'm about to plant that as a cutting and get it to root. It's called Euphorbia Cattails. And then there's an Echeveria prolifica, which I've been meaning to plant, which I haven't. And finally a colorata. But like I said, I just passed this on the way to the backyard. So just wanted to show you that real quick. I think I have some more sedums though. Give me just a second. Okay, so I found some more, and these are just in a little bin that is in the shade. And this one right here with the pink flowers, that one's also one that stays out all year. It's called Sedum Autumn Joy, from what I'm told. I'm starting to think maybe that's the Sedum Angeline, and then this is something else, but I can't remember. But anyway, sedums in general, they like to grow when it's a little bit cooler. The cold hardy ones definitely grow more in the cooler months. But there are some sedums that will not make it through the winter, like for this, for example. I just shoved these in here because they fell off another plant and they've since rooted. And they're some sort of cremnosedum, but you see how they kind of look like an Echeveria? So I threw those in there, so I could not leave this out all winter. I'd have to take those out, but the other ones could, and they're pretty happy right under here in the shade. They don't get a lot of sun, maybe just a little bit. And that's because it's so hot here in our summers, and I just think it's just going to scorch them. In fact, they're already a little scorched right now. And it also looks like some pests have gotten a hold of them, so maybe I need to spray them, but I'm just going to leave them alone because they can deal with it. So let's talk about a couple other things. All right, so a couple last things I want to talk about. I want to talk about hens and chicks, and those are the little well, they're called sempervivums. That's the actual name of them, but everyone calls them hens and chicks because there's usually one big one and then these other little ones that cluster around. And I'll put a picture up in one of the corners. Now those guys are also ones that can be outside year-round, even if you get freezing temperatures. So if you guys want to make a garden that can be left out all year and you get freezing temperatures, that's something really cool to put in there. So they like cooler temperatures, and mine really hate our summers. So I don't put any out in full sun. I put them in the same place as the sedum. I put them under my azalea bushes, and they grow just fine under there because they're mostly in the shade all day. They don't really stretch out, and the only time you will really see one stretch out is if it's going into its bloom. And with those, they do get what we call the death bloom. So the middle one will bloom, it'll die, but it'll make all the babies before it dies. So in general, those guys, they like cooler temperatures. They like more shade, in my experience. And like I said, I'm not an expert on any of these. This is just how I've taken care of mine and how I've kept them surviving in my climate. So it may be totally different for you guys if you're in a different type of climate. But here where I am, the hens and chicks, they like more shade, a little bit of morning sun if anything. I don't water them unless it rains, so I just let them get rainwater. But if I had them in a place, in a pot somewhere that was under some cover, I would pretty much water them. Like I said, when the soil gets completely dry, I'd wait several more days and then I'd water them. And I don't really care too much for hens and chicks. They're probably one of my least favorite succulents, but it's not that I don't have any. I just don't really like them. I don't know why. I just don't like them a lot. I do have some. Oh, there's a bug. Okay, so in that same category, things I'm not really a big fan of, the Sansevierias or the mother-in-law's tongue. So here's one, and this is the only one I have. So that tells you how much I love them. It stays here in the gazebo. I water it maybe once every 2 or 3 weeks, and a lot of people will keep these guys in the house. The reason the new growth looks so good is because I had it out in the greenhouse and it hated the heat. And then once I brought it in here, it started getting really happy because they like the shade. So they like a lot more shade, if anything, just morning sun. And then they're very similar to the Haworthias, except they like even less water. So I just really don't water this at all unless something's not looking right. And my dogs are barking at something, so I'm gonna finish the rest of this video in just a minute. So I'll see you in a second. Okay guys, so change in scenery. My dogs were barking earlier because a friend came over, and so I had to do some things. And also, you probably noticed I'm in different clothes and my hair is wet. I went on a leisurely walk down a little ways from our yard, and when I came back I had a tick on me, and then when I looked around some more I had one of those tiny ones, and so I freaked out and I had to go change clothes and take a shower. But anyway, I'm back, and really the last thing that I wanted to talk about, and I know these are not even related, but I'm kind of lumping them together, is Kalanchoe and Crassulas. They're not the same and they all look different. There are Kalanchoe that are green, Panda Plant is a Kalanchoe, a Flapjack is a Kalanchoe, here's a Snow White Panda Plant. So they look all different ways, and most of them like lots of sun. Some like a little bit more than others, but just like all the rest of them, you know, if they stretch or they look like they're just really getting wilty or floppy too fast, they probably need less. Or vice versa, you know, if they look like they're getting sunburned, then maybe they could tolerate a little bit less, or you just didn't acclimate them. And then Crassula, there's a bunch of different types too, like you've probably heard of the lavender scallops. And just right here, I did find this pot of these little, I think this is called baby's necklace, but there's so many different types and they all look different, so it's not always easy to just look at a plant and say, oh, that's a Crassula or that's a Kalanchoe. But once you kind of start, you know, getting to know succulents a little bit more, you can start being able to tell. But same thing with those, you know, as far as light, you got to figure out what they like. Like I know these guys will stretch if I don't give them full light. They'll just stretch out. Same thing with the Crassula perforata or the string of buttons. They'll grow, they'll just be a lot more space in between the leaves. So these do like a lot of light. They could get sunburned possibly, but I haven't had a big issue with any of them getting sunburned. Except for the one Kalanchoe, the Blossophildinia or something like that. I'll put it on the screen, but that one, the leaves do burn kind of easily. And people sell that a lot of times at the store. I think that's one of the easier ones to take care of. But I do have some of those, and their leaves are a little crispy because I may or may not have neglected them in here. But I'm lumping those together. They're not the same thing, but as far as light, you just kind of have to figure out, are they stretching or are they getting sunburnt, and kind of adjust accordingly. And then as far as watering requirements, same thing. I don't water them until the soil is completely dry, and then I wait several more days. I mean, it could be 5 or 6 more days. I mean, unless they look really, really floppy, or sometimes if they start getting these air roots like this, okay, this one really does need water. You see how floppy that leaf is? So I was neglecting these. I forgot I even had this, and it was behind a bunch of stuff. So finally, there are a lot more categories. The last one I want to talk about really quick, and I know for you fans of these, you're going to be mad that I'm barely spending any time on it, but the lithops and the split rocks, so the little ones that look like little brains, I'm not a fan of those. I don't like them. They're very picky though. They hardly ever need to be watered, and I mean like once or twice a year, and hardly any soil, like, you know, organic stuff in their mix. So lots and lots of rock, pumice, turfus, any kind of that stuff, chicken grit, whatever. They're very picky. You can overwater them and they can die really easily. So a lot of people cannot keep those alive. I'm not a fan of them. I don't have a single one, and I've probably got over 1,000 succulents. So just wanted to talk about those. So that's my quick deal on different types and their basic requirements. And I know I went over these a whole bunch, and I think in the future I may just do episodes just all on one thing. And I'd love to hear comments from you guys on what you want me to do episodes on, and that would give me some ideas as far as new things to do on my videos. But I think the polls are kind of cool because I did that one earlier, and that's why I did this video instead of finishing my garden, which still has a little bit more to go, but I'm still working on that, and I'll definitely let you know how that goes. All right, so finally, the last thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go in the house and I'm gonna get on the computer because I use that wheel to give away, to pick the winner of the giveaway. And so what I think I'm gonna give away is a big thing of cuttings. So cuttings of all sorts of things, you know, like fire sticks, donkey tails, stuff like that. And if you win and you don't know much about cuttings, don't worry, I have a video about that, but it's not as hard as you think. Just keep them out of a lot of sun. And anyway, I'll send you a link to the video. But if you win, then I want you to comment, or I'll comment with your name, and then I want you to just comment and give me your email address, and then I can send you the prize. So we're gonna go inside and draw, and then we'll be done with the video. See you in a minute. Okay everyone, this is how I do my drawings. I use this website called Wheel of Names, and these are all the people who commented on my last video and who are subscribers. So one of you guys is gonna win a box of cuttings and goodies. So whoever wins, I'm gonna send you some stuff, so I will comment under your comment, and I wanna get your email address. But I wanna tell you guys that I love you guys for watching, and I hope anyone who's watching who isn't a subscriber will continue to subscribe, because I love to do giveaways, and I also just love for other people to learn about succulents so you guys can get as many as I do and have lots of fun. So anyway, let's go ahead and pick our winner, and here we go. So, winner for this 1,000 subscriber giveaway is Marcia Connor. So Marcia, I'm gonna send you a message. I'm gonna comment on your thing, but I'm gonna need your email. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next video. Bye-bye.